Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be around the world, where you're listening to this podcast. My name is Mike Graen, and I welcome you to another Conversations on Retail and the University of Arkansas Supply Chain organization, to another discussion around on-shelf availability in retail. We're going to get to the introductions in just a minute, but just a couple of kind of introductory comments. The first is we want to make sure that we recognize this is kind of co-owned by both Conversations on Retail as well as the University of Arkansas and the Supply Chain Management Research Council. If you're interested in learning more about that group or being part of the on-shelf availability group, you can contact either Conversations on Retail or the University of Arkansas. We appreciate all of their support in leading us and supporting this particular effort. Secondly, we've got a couple of sponsors that have already joined Conversations on Retail. One is the Brain Corporation, which we'll talk about here in a second. The other one is Barcoding. Barcoding, we actually hosted last month, and they did a great job of walking through what some of their capabilities are. The Brain Corporation is really a very interesting company that we're working very closely with. And if you're interested more about that, you can talk to Gavin Donnelly, whose contact information is on here. But Brain is an autonomous robot, basically an AMR, that will navigate airports, hotels, but as it relates to retail, they are automatic floor cleaning robots. For example, in Sam's Club, you'll see them. They also have camera systems and RFID systems and other things that they can, while they're cleaning floors, they can do a number of different contact and data collection. So if you're interested in any of that, please talk to Gavin. Okay. Couple of logistical things before we kick off. First off, we've got a bunch of folks on the line already. We're going to try and make this as interactive as possible. What we will do is, if you have a question at any time, go ahead and submit that question via the chat. Both Matt Pfeiffer for Conversations on Retail and myself will be monitoring that chat. So if you have a question for Jamie or Umesh, please go ahead and put it in that chat. That would be great. And then if we do have time at the end, we could potentially open this up for just a online discussion once we've finished the recording. Last but not least, we do run all these under federal antitrust guidelines. So that means we don't talk about any pricing or anything that would look like a competitive situation with products or anything like that. So we're going to run those after this entire session under antitrust guidelines. All right. Well, that from the background standpoint over with, I want to introduce or let them introduce themselves. We'll start with Jamie. Both of these folks are with the Sensormatic /JCI company. Jamie, we'll start with you. Go ahead and unmute and kind of introduce yourself to the audience.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us as well. So I'm Jamie Kress. I'm responsible for the RFID business for North America for Sensormatic. Been in the RFID business now for just about 20 years. 15 of that has been with Sensormatic over the years. Prior to that, I was with the company that Sensormatic acquired with the RFID software. So been a part of this group since really the inception of RFID, been involved with programs all over North America and some in Europe as well. So excited to talk to you and the group about it today.
Well, if you've been doing it for 20 years, we should be done by now, right, Jamie?
Exactly
isn't the
right.
work done? We can just all retire and go sit on the beach somewhere, right?
Wouldn't that be great? Right, exactly. Exactly.
All right. And my good friend Umesh, you've been in this industry a long time as well, but I believe you're fairly new to JCI and Sensormatic. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Mike Cooduvalli. I've done pilots and rollouts in the US, in Europe, and also in Asia, including China and Japan. So I've been in the RFID space for over a decade, and I know a lot of people. And thank you all for attending this session, and look forward to our conversation today.
Got it. Well, again, I appreciate you guys spending the time for sure going through this. There's a lot of confusion out in the industry. And Jamie, I was kidding you about doing this for 20 years. We should be done. Because I think if anything, it's gotten more complicated than it's gotten simpler. Even though the technology's gotten better, it certainly works better, but it's all delivered on kind of that focus on shelf availability for customers. That's where we always start. So tell us a little bit about Sensormatic and JCI, the interesting relationship with the two companies. Kind of tell us a little bit about, what do they do beyond RFID, and then specifically, what do they do in the RFID space?
Yeah, certainly. I think we might have a slide to show that, but I can certainly speak to it. Sensormatic is a part of the Johnson Controls family. We are the Sensormatic brand is the retail brand for Johnson Controls. We really have three primary pieces of our business, which you can see there on the screen. We have our heritage, which is in loss prevention. So that's how most people know us in the industry. That's where we have a lot of representation across retailers all over the globe with our loss prevention business. Next is our traffic or our stopper track business. Again, it's a global business for us, but yet somewhat separate from the RFID business. And then lastly, what we call inventory intelligence, or our RFID business, and that's what we're here to talk about today. What's interesting, what's happened over the years, where those three divisions used to be kind of separate groups for Sensormatic, we found out probably 3-4 years ago that there are so many great insights that you can get across those areas when you look at combining traffic level insights with RFID, and especially looking at the loss prevention insights. I think we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on today, but with the rise in ORC and the challenges we have and the smart exit solutions we've deployed, the connection to the LP side of the business and RFID has really grown over the years.
Yeah, just to build on that, I'm sure we've all seen at a number of times the video when Doug McMillan was part of the Squawk Box thing, where he said, if we don't figure out how to get this under control, we'll either raise prices or shut down stores. And now they're shutting down stores in Portland. They haven't exactly attributed to those, but I think it doesn't take a genius to figure out those are probably connected for sure.
Yeah, so absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yep. Well, let's start. I love to start each one of these out with, you're not only a retail executive in the space, specifically on things like inventory intelligence and loss prevention, et cetera, but you're also a customer. Each one of us go and buy things from stores, whether we walk in a store and buy it and through the traditional brick and mortar, or we buy it online and pick it up in store, or whatever we happen to do. But tell us about a time from a customer perspective that you were disappointed. You thought you had the track on getting some product in the store, only to find out they didn't have it. So I'll put you guys on the spot and see if you got a couple of examples, because we all have them.
Yeah, no, we talk a lot about this. I'll jump in first, Umesh. So, we've all been there. We walk into the store, we're looking for the size we're trying to get. We're searching through a stack trying to find that specific size. Most customers don't want to ask for help and have the associate kind of dig. So we've experienced that. I was going to, when I was thinking about this this morning, it's with the rise in omni-channel, we all are shopping online many times first before we go to the store. There's nothing more frustrating than when you look online for something, you want to go to your nearby store that you prefer to shop at. They don't have it. You happen to be there later that day or the next day, and you see what you were searching for on the shelf. So it's a little bit of a twist on your question, which is I was disappointed online. I find the customer has it in the store, which is frustrating for the retailer because they could have sold that to me with my online purchase the day before. And I think it just begins to erode the customer's confidence in the brand. And I think that's what we see. I mean, as a consumer, I know that happens to me, and those are some of the challenges that we're trying to solve and that you're addressing with this podcast.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I had an experience. Went to a cell phone store to buy a case for my phone, and this is a major cell phone retailer, and they don't have the proper pairing of inventory. For all the right sizes of the phones, they don't have the right chargers or the cell phone cases, etc. So they could easily do it with RFID solutions. And also, they didn't know. They told me to go to a nearby store, and they didn't even know if they would have it or not. So this is something that we easily do. We do it today in sports and fashion. We can show what you have in that particular store and what you have in a nearby store as well. So I thought that was interesting. I think, with electronics, that's another, a tangential market that's going to grow as more awareness happens with what are the possibilities.
Yeah. There was a recent article by IHC group that said that 24% of Amazon's revenue started because somebody tried to buy something in store and then couldn't find it. So they used the retailer's Wi-Fi to order it from Amazon. How about that for a slap in the face? So
that's awful.
Yeah, that's awful. That's awful. Thank you very much for giving me the free Wi-Fi to order the product I was here to get from you, but I went and bought it from Amazon because they had it and they'll deliver it in 3 days. Fascinating, right? Fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that very good, very, very good examples, et cetera. So talk a little bit about the retail industry itself. I mean, we've already talked about the disappointment of a customer perspective that we didn't actually understand exactly how products are in the store, and we end up pushing people to competitors because unfortunately we didn't have what we wanted. Sensormatic has played a role in that, either from a loss prevention standpoint or inventory management standpoint. And so there's all this excitement, all of these big retailers, Walmart, Target, Macy's, Nordstrom's, Dick's Sporting Goods, Dillard's, everybody's kind of excited about RFID, and that's become the new platform for how you do work, especially if you're an apparel retailer. So how does Sensormatic fit into that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Years ago, Mike, when you and I would be talking about this, we would be talking about what does RFID do for in-store execution? How does it allow an associate in the store to know what's in the back room that needs to be brought to the front of the store? A lot of retailers do a fantastic job with making their store look perfect. It looks beautiful. All the shelves are full. But what's really hiding behind those full shelves are, they're the wrong sizes. You have a shelf full of smalls or a shelf full of mediums or a footwear display wall that is missing several colors that, the customer's not going to buy it if they don't know that color is available. What we've seen change with the onset of omnichannel, and a lot of times I'll go talk to a customer and they'll say, well, tell me the connection between RFID and omnichannel, because omnichannel is online. And you always give the example of, if your inventory accuracy in that store, or the stores where you're looking for the inventory for your customers, if your inventory accuracy at 60%, 70%, on a good day, maybe it's 80% in a traditional world. If your OMS system is looking for that inventory in the store and it thinks it's there, but it's not, so now you have store associates who are searching for items in that store for that omni order, and they have to decline that order. Then it goes to the next store. Then it goes to the next store. So you have huge impacts on labor. You've got huge impacts on your shipping and split shipment situations. Back to your previous question, as consumers, several of us will place an order online, and then we wait for the order to kind of come in. You get 3 or 4 different boxes, and you always think, gosh, I just placed one order. Why am I getting these boxes at different times in different boxes? So I think that's where, we've seen as Sensormatic, we've seen a tremendous change in the industry as we've gone just from in-store execution. Now we're looking at omnichannel, and then where we're seeing it now is, everyone at NRF, for example, was talking about self-checkout. That becomes the big conversation. How do you make it as frictionless as possible? And RFID has a tremendous role in that space as well. How can RFID, if you're putting the tag on the product, you as a retailer are making the investment in that tag, it is to your benefit as a retailer to figure out how many use cases can I support and grow with that initial investment. First, I'll fix my inventory accuracy. Then I'll improve my omnichannel program. Then I'll be able to look at self-checkout. Then I can understand my shrink at the exit. All those things tie together. And that's what's fun about it, because the use cases just keep growing and growing.
Yeah, and I talk to a lot of people also at NRF, and what's happened there, they talk about endless aisle, right? So, and the velocity of orders has increased tremendously. I mean, just look at how many people order right from their phone, and also the increase in DTC, direct to consumer business, has probably tripled. And the retailers can make more money with DTC, right? So that portion of the business has significantly increased. What that means is the DC use cases. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, of course. So, yeah.
Yep. Well, and what's been interesting about this is you mentioned just the DC work, Umesh. I think that's right, because what's interesting about RFID when you look at, and Jamie, you and I have been working on this for a long time, we started out in the 2000s thinking about it as a supply chain from manufacturer to the distribution center to the store, et cetera. And we all go, well, wait a minute. The real value proposition here is at the store, making sure you know exactly what you have and where it's located. Well, now fast forward 20 years, now inventory accuracy at the store is better, much better for those retailers that are using it. And they're starting to think, well, what can we do this from a supply chain perspective? How do we eliminate claims because of they said I didn't ship them enough stuff, but I can tell you I did ship them stuff, and I've got proof because it left our dock. Here's what we actually had. To me, it's actually reversing back to where we're back in 2005 and starting to think about the supply chain opportunities now that we got the stores taken care of. So, Umesh, any thoughts on other kind of opportunities that you see?
Oh, absolutely. Well, Jamie already talked about self-checkout, assisted self-checkout, those types of customer experience use cases. Those are important. And also in the DC, I don't know if we're going to talk about now or later, there's so many use cases, about reducing chargebacks to everything. And what I see is that is incoming, receiving audit. But more and more retailers are doing outbound verification. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you all saw, it's on the internet. UPS announced a huge program that is a game changer. They announced $140 million investment for this year in 2023 just for the RFID program. Yep. That is phenomenal. They're looking at misloads, reducing that 1 in 400 to 1 in 800. That is phenomenal. It's a 10x improvement.
Yep.
And all the errors you see in cross-docking and everything else will go away.
Yep. So I got a chat question from Ursula. I think it's a really good question. Do you have some examples outside of apparel? Everybody's heard the apparel success stories. Are there? And someone mentioned Sam's. I think it was a different conversations regarding Sam's. I think I mentioned that. But do you see it starting to expand outside just an apparel play?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, Umesh. We are seeing tremendous growth outside of apparel. Largely due to the Walmart with their requirement for tags on new categories. But those categories make so much sense. When I gave the example earlier of the denim wall, someone trying to find a pair of pants, they all look the same. The same can be true of a wall full of tires, a wall full of car batteries. Umesh's example, a wall of accessories or iPhones. All of those things still suffer from the same core problem, which is it's a dense SKU environment. It visibly looks the same to the customer, and how can we provide tools to them to help the associates make sure the stores are fully stocked, but also help the consumer. We're seeing benefits for using an EPC tag to not only identify that item, but maybe tying it to the IMEI number on that particular phone, so that you're now managing the serialization of those phones. So we are seeing, I would say to that question, that's where all the growth is that we're seeing in the market right now. And I'll say one more thing. What is fun about RFID, and Mike and Umesh, I'm sure you've seen it, is you go into a retail environment, you're trying to solve 1, 2, or 3 primary problems. And invariably in the pilot or the first year of that program, you find a problem and a solution with RFID that you never expected as part of the original program. Macy's did that early on, years ago, with their footwear compliance solution. RFID solved that for them. And that's what's fun. And I think we've uncovered a lot of those in apparel and footwear, but we're just scratching the surface on those similar use cases that probably someone hasn't even thought of yet, in hard goods, in electronics, in automotive, in sporting goods, not just the apparel on sporting goods, but also, all those the golf clubs and the bats and the hockey skates. I think that what's interesting for all of us who are in the industry is we're about to uncover some really interesting use cases that no one's ever thought of. And as a friend of mine says in the industry, what's great about RFID is it shines a light on a problem that you never really knew how to solve, or maybe you didn't even know it existed. And I think that's what we're all kind of looking forward to.
I'd like to add health and beauty. We just did a rollout for Renner in Brazil, 400 store rollout, health and beauty products, small items, They have a lot of inventory issues that were solved, and we have a case study on our website for people to download.
Awesome. Yeah, clearly, I got a great opportunity to be part of Walmart when we rolled out the automotive tire and automotive battery that Jamie mentioned, and everyone was like, "How do you lose a tire?" Happens all the time, right? We think we have 4. We tell the customer we have 4. They drive in. We go try and get 4. We only have 3. Now what do?
Right.
I didn't lose 1 sale. I lost 4 sales because nobody's going to put 3 tires on, right? Printer cartridges. You've got 100 printer cartridges, thousands of printer cartridges in a store at a Best Buy or Walmart, but you're missing the black cartridge for my HP printer. I'm not going to switch. I'm not going to switch. And I think the only other one that I would tell you that some of the big CPG suppliers are starting to get pulled into RFID because of Walmart's direction on things like automotive and hardware. Well, guess what? B&Gs of the world sell air fresheners for automotive, so they're going to get introduced to that business. And Kimberly-Clark probably makes paper towels or industrial paper towels for hardware departments, so they're going to start getting introduced to this concept. The only other thing I'll tell you is RFID in food right now is exploding. Right?
Huge.
Because not only it's the on-hand accuracy, but I actually, when I apply the product, for example, to a package of lettuce, I know exactly how many days it's been on the shelf, so I could potentially mark it down for a reduced sale rather than throwing away the food. So there's a whole dating process. That sounds bad, but you get the point. The aging of product and making sure that you are keeping the freshest product available for the customers.
Yeah. And what I love about that example is, there's certainly the corporate view or the business view of having that freshness view. I also love the store associate view of it, right? The store associate, they are tasked with making sure that they have the items on the store shelves that you want to sell first, and that you're not putting, the newest items and that they're aging in the back. To give them the tools that makes that job for them easier, to be able to identify the lettuce in your example that's going to expire earlier and make sure that's on the shelf so that you're not mixing up what's on the shelf. I love the examples where the store associates are the ones saying, "Hey, thank you for deploying this. It makes my life so much easier."
Absolutely.
Just to add to that, this is first in, first out. Even in fast food, right? McDonald's and Chipotle. There's a great case study, online. You can find there, really good use cases and recall management, right? So, in food supply chain, something always happens, right? So you can pinpoint where it went bad instead of the entire country shutting down, like what happened with Chipotle. There's a lot of use cases,
So hopefully that answers the question around category expansion. Are we tagging watermelon yet? No, I don't think so. Will we ever? I'm not sure that we will in my lifetime. There's certain products that just don't make sense because of RF challenges, frankly, because of price points. I don't even know if there'll be a day where we'll put it on cereal. Because if I'm looking for this particular cereal and you don't have it, I'm leaving with cereal, right? I'm not. I may switch. I may not be happy, but I don't know that I have to RFID tag cereal. I could be wrong, but clearly,
really not about the price point, but it's about how much profit you make on that item. It's all about that. Like I know some retailers, like some of our customers who are fully tagged in the entire store. They actually tag a water bottle, plastic water bottle. They sell for like $3.99. They're tagging that because their margins there are like nearly 80 or 90% profit.
Good point.
So,
good point.
And managing the inventory accuracy in those high dollar profit SKUs is important to them.
Yeah.
So I think what you're going to hear is RFID. Number one, nobody needs to do a pilot to see if RFID works. That's over. Everybody knows it works. To me, number two, and I think that was a very, very important question, it is no longer just an apparel play. It's an electronics play. It's a hardware play. It's a food play. You're going to see people reapplying this for different uses. And I think your McDonald's and Chipotle examples are really good. Matter of fact, a shameless plug for RFID Journal. I think McDonald's is going to be presenting at RFID Journal, talking about the success story that they've done with their quick service restaurants things. So it's going to continue to expand categorically. I want to switch this thing to the reason we actually did this was just to get the inventory accurate in store. But now that we've got things tagged and they're typically tagged at store, what are the kinds of use cases are available other than just getting your inventory right? So we're going to turn this over, a big, broad question, but what else are retailers and suppliers using this RFID technology for beyond just getting the inventory right at store level?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of use cases that people look at, and I think, and some require fixed infrastructure in the store to kind of enable, and others don't. Let me use an example of fitting rooms. People have and again, I'm going back to the apparel example, but people have talked a lot about, and we have tested over the years and have partners in the space of how can we get the most out of our fitting room? How can we get the data out of the fitting room? In previous years, you didn't know why an item wasn't selling, and so you just continued to mark that item down until you had to get it out of the stores. To know within a matter of days that certain items are going into the fitting rooms multiple times a day and then not being sold, that's phenomenal information. So I think that's an example of a use case in addition to inventory accuracy. But then you begin to look at, okay, loss prevention. How do I get better control over my loss prevention? So certainly you're going to have an eye on shrink always. Let's use the fitting room example. How do I know if I put a smart exit, which we have a significant number of Macy's today? If I put an exit, so I know exactly what left the store, tie that to video, know the exact items that went out the store, and know those price points. And if I know the last read of some of those in certain stores are when it's going through a fitting room, if you have readers around the fitting room, where that source of theft is taking place. You don't always know that. But I think that's an example. So I think, the biggest use case with the biggest return, Mike, that we're seeing right now is all around ORC. It's all around shrink management and all the tools that RFID can give you in that space.
Yep.
Yeah. And I would talk about, I'll mention 3 use cases: replenishment, the key use case, so how do you replenish to the sales floor so you don't have zero on the sales floor? It's about planogram management, right? So what you don't show, you don't sell. So you got to replenish intelligently, the high dollar value items, high profit items, make sure they're represented on the sales floor at all times, right? Intraday replenishments, even within the same day. Like outlet malls, like Orlando, places like that. By the time you open the store at 10 a.m., by noon, you were already sold out on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So you have to replenish 3-4 times within the same day. Mm-hmm. So everything is real time with APIs that we do. So it's fantastic. Second use case I want to talk about is store-to-store transfers, or store back to DC transfers. What happens in different seasons? What do you do with the items you have? A store in Orlando is not the same as a store in Alaska, right? so
really? I didn't know that.
And receiving is a great use case. With RFID receiving, I have done my own studies. It's about 6 times more efficient. That means 6 times more cost savings than how you normally do receiving. And if you are replenishing, typically most retailers replenish about 4 to 5 times per week in each store. So that is a significant per store cost savings, which basically pays for the entire program.
So in many retailers, there are 2 ways to sell things. One is, we call it on the shelf or on the side counter. One is display, end of aisle display, or Action Alley. Walmart calls it Action Alley, et cetera. Ursula just asked a question around, can you use RFID technology to leverage whether the display got set or not? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, we've tackled that a couple different ways in a couple different environments. So we've run programs or evaluated tagging the actual floor display in totality. So if you have a shrink wrap display that you want to move from back to front, like in a Walmart example, you can certainly know that was supposed to hit the sales floor on March 1st, or the directive from corporate. You can know via RFID that item has actually moved from back to front. when you get into zone level accuracy on the sales floor, it becomes a little bit more challenging with an RFID environment to know where something is on an end cap versus an aisle. But I would say micro location is another of the use cases and capabilities that really all of the players in the market are looking at, and I think it has tremendous value. So eventually, with micro location, you can begin to apply a value associated to different locations in the store. You certainly think the end cap is the most valuable location, but how can you apply it to the front table, to the end cap, to various locations in the store? So using micro location will certainly enable that as well.
Yeah, and I think other retailers actually think about displays. For example, if I'm a Procter and Gamble and I've got a display that's going to go into Walmart, some of them are thinking about, in addition to tagging all the items on the display, I'm going to put a case level tag or a pallet level tag on the display itself. So if I read that tag, which is identifying the pallet and the products at the same time, I could pretty much tell you, guess what, the pallet got set the way it was supposed to, right? So that's another obvious benefit of that. So you guys, this is a little bit of an off question, but we've got Jonathan asking this one. I think it's a really good one. This doesn't happen with just software, right? There's hardware component, there's a tag component, et cetera. How in the world do you think through, if I'm coming to you, for example, Jamie, and go, hey, I want to build an RFID solution. I don't know that Sensormatic has all of the pieces. So what are the various pieces that I need to consider, and who do I go to for both tagging as well as the hardware aspect of this?
Right. Great point. So the solutions are typically hardware, software, services, and tags oftentimes fall within, they're the cousin of the hardware bucket. And you do need all of those. And I saw Jonathan's question in there. Getting tags on product, customers ask us all the time, especially those that are new to RFID, how do I do this? Well, we have run pilots for years where for a pilot, you don't have to have source tagging. We recommend that if you can tag for a pilot in a distribution center, that is ideal. We have run pilots where they're actually tagging in the store. Not ideal because you're taking a lot of that labor in the store to do that type of task. So if you can move that to DC, great. But our ultimate goal is always to move that tagging back to the source. And we've been doing that as an industry for years, and all the major players, the tag providers who are providing tags to the stores today, have RFID enabled tags that they can apply to the goods. And the form factor of those tags run the gamut, from a hang tag to a label to a sewn in, all sorts of different tag formats to meet the particular retailer's needs. And one more thing I wanted to touch on, Mike, that made me think of earlier, is when we talked about category expansion, this relates to tagging. One of the bad pieces of information that's out there is that a retailer has to tag everything in their store to make it successful. There are programs in the market today that have been around for years that are not tagging all of the items in their stores. If it makes sense for a certain retailer to do so, absolutely. But there are major programs rolled out across the country or the globe where they have selected certain categories to be tagged with RFID and other categories not to. So, and you can work with your tag provider to say, these are the items that are going to be tagged and other ones are not.
Perfect.
A couple of things I would like to add is, we also recommend the right hardware for the right use cases. In the store automation use cases, we would like to, I always recommend the mobile handheld device, the RFID sled with a device. Whether it's iOS or Android, we support both. And you can do a lot of use cases with it. And typically most retailers will add a fixed reader, like a transition reader from the backroom to the sales floor, and vice versa, for moves and replenishments. Automatically, it puts the items from one zone to another. So that's another one. And we also have used fixed readers for, of course, POEs and ship from store use cases.
POE. So, do you define POE exit to the audience?
Yeah, point of exit.
Point of exit. Yep. Thank you.
There's a use case for RFID as EAS, where we mark the item as sold at the POS, and as it leaves the door, if the item wasn't paid for, it alarms.
Yep. Okay. Great. So let's go into a couple of other ones. Jamie, you and I were sort of talking back and forth before we got on this thing around implementing RFID for product availability, for picking, et cetera. Obviously, you guys work with a lot of retailers. Do you have any good examples where people sort of best in class that they're leveraging this capability for the omni-channel purposes?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have several examples, and I skipped over that at the beginning, talking about some of the customers that we work with. You know, we work with customers like Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger. We've been working with Macy's for years, Victoria's Secret, Allbirds. So we have lots of different customers who are at different stages of using it. I would say the vast majority of those retailers are utilizing their RFID tag goods to augment their omni-channel program. I think that's the question you're asking me. So they're all doing it in a little bit of a different way, but I think they're all trying to reach the same end goal, which is make sure you have inventory accuracy, make sure that the OMS system is directing the orders to the right stores, making sure that you do not have split shipments, and that you're not extending labor where you don't need to in the store. So, and then when that OMS order arrives in the store, being able to use RFID as a Geiger counter or to help the store associates find those items, that's been a huge benefit. So if there's let's say there's one pair of jeans, a 32, 34 jean in that store, that's hard to find. And so to first be able to look at the RFID data for the store and say, hey, that item is actually on the sales floor, not in the back room, that gives them the first bit of information. And then they can use the tools with the handheld that Umesh was talking about to direct them to where in the store that is. And that's been a huge benefit as well.
Yeah, a couple of points here. So the goal is to reduce omni cancel rates, right? So you get an omni order, and then you use the Geiger function. It beeps louder and louder as you get closer to the item to find it. Now, I say if you don't hear a single beep, just transfer the order to another location so you don't lose that order, because it's definitely not there, the item.
Gotcha. Yep. Perfect. So this one is an interesting one because, Jamie, you started out this conversation saying that you guys were both an inventory as well as an asset protection loss prevention tool. And for years, you've had basically EAS portals that alarmed when a certain item didn't get demagnetized at the register, didn't necessarily have a lot of intelligence. Now I have an RFID tag. Walk us through, and I think two reasons. Number one, you have the right to be able to lead in this area because you've been in loss protection so long. Plus, you're working with, I think, is a state-of-the-art retailer with Macy's and Joe Cole specifically about the great things he's doing leveraging RFID as an asset protection tool. So a big, broad question, which is, what does the future look like with RFID and EAS? How are they going to play together? What do you see as the future?
Yeah, so they certainly will play together. I'll answer this question a couple different ways. We're seeing, we are seeing customers who are somewhat new to EAS or utilizing something at the door who are getting started with RFID as EAS. And when we use that terminology, we actually mean just using an RFID tag. It doesn't even have to be, or maybe can't be, uniquely encoded for that item, but putting an RFID tag and letting the RFID system at the exit alarm. So that's really just using RFID, but as the same tool that they've used previously. What's nice about that solution it gives that retailer the migration path to get to a full inventory program where they could then move from non-uniquely tagged items, using it just for loss prevention and alarming purposes, to item-level encoded tags with a full inventory program that has all the benefits we've been talking about on this call, and allowing them to utilize that RFID tag for loss prevention purposes, knowing if that item has been sold or not at point of sale. So when it goes to the exit, it alarms, creating shrink reports at the exit that show you how many bulk events did I have in this in a given day, in a given week. What is the trend for when these items are going out of the store? What are the price points for the items going out of the store? The data that's available to the retailer, to the loss prevention professional now, in many ways is almost overwhelming because previously they reacted to alarm events. And we talk all the time as a company about a loss event. And so you know that something happened. You don't necessarily know what happened, but you know something happened. Now you know exactly what was taken. You tie that to video, and you really have now investigative tools that can allow the loss prevention team to resolve those cases much faster. So that's just one example. We're also working with customers who are utilizing RFID and taking readers into bodegas and reading items that have been stolen are being resold below a barbershop in Soho, and identifying these are all these items that were stolen from various stores all over the country, and where were those items stolen from. So, the loss prevention capabilities, once you have those tags on those items, is pretty wide and broad for sure.
Yeah, and also we can identify, if somebody were to buy an item or steal an item and return it in another store, we will know it was a stolen item. And also, in my view, AM technology, EAS technology has been around for decades, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of customers we have in retail that have been using that. What is their path to progress? So we have to provide them a path to progress, and that progress is the dual technology, AM and RFID, and we offer those tags, the dual technology tags, and then they're suddenly able to do a lot of the use cases we talked about.
Yeah, and Jamie mentioned it's not an all or nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So you have some retailers out there that are really RFID heavy in certain categories, mm-hmm. apparel, electronics, et cetera. But they're also selling razor blades, which are a high shrink item, et cetera. So EAS and RFID are going to have to work together. I don't think it's a no-brainer that they eventually will merge into one. Yep. From my perspective, you're going to have both, unless you're like a Macy's where you are 100% RFID tagged across your box. From my perspective, I think that makes sense. So one of the questions I guess that has been asked is there a way, and somebody texted this one to me, it's not in the chat. It's great that you can see what left the store that didn't get paid for. That we call that kind of the POS bypass. What bypassed POS, et cetera. The question is, if RFID is able to be read throughout the retail store, are there any actions that a retailer can take before it leaves the store? It's great to know when it left the store, exactly what time and what location, and match up the video. But is an RFID capable of catching it before it leaves the store to potentially stop that individual from taking the item inappropriately?
Yeah, I certainly think you could use RFID to create alerts, right? So if you see, we used to talk about could you put readers under tables to see that there's been a table sweep, right? So that that front table that's typically the table that's being stolen from. And you could send an alert to an associate that there is a shelf sweep taking place. Mm-hmm. There are, you could alert an associate that there are a certain number of items being taken into or out of a fitting room, or that there's activity taking place at the back of the store. There are, can we utilize RFID to see what might be taking place in a DC environment? Are there items leaving a DC that shouldn't be leaving a DC? So, and if so, what loss prevention tools should we put at those exits or in those locations? So I do think there's some things that you can do to minimize those shrink events in a store environment. What I always say we have to be careful of is we don't want to over alert, right? We really want that store associate to be doing what their first job is, which is servicing the customer. Mm-hmm. So we got to be really careful about there's a difference between what you can alert on and what you should alert on. So we're really cautious and careful when we work with our customers to say, yes, there's a huge opportunity for you in what you do with RFID, but let's take it small. Let's take it piece by piece so that we're not overwhelming the store associate.
Got it. Okay. Umesh, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add that it's all about actionable data. Not a core dump of data. So,
yeah, absolutely,
fair enough. Some of the interesting use cases that I'm seeing, and Jonathan Aiken, who's actually on this call from Avery Dennison, and I've had this conversation several times, which is the labor reduction play. Okay. Mm-hmm. Number one, RFID does a much better job and is much faster at counting inventory levels, et cetera, versus scanning every single item. But what do you see the future of potentially leveraging RFID to replace the annual inventory audits, which are typically very expensive? You got to shut down the store basically to do it. Do you ever see a day, and what's the path look like that allows us to literally replace these annual inventory audits with an RFID cycle count?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the end goal. I mean, that's a huge amount of labor, as we all know, for those annual counts. Not just, there's not the labor component, there's shutting down the store, there's closing the store early, there's bringing in staff, and then the drain on the staff, or if you hire an outsourced firm. So yes, you can use RFID for those annual PI counts. And some customers just choose certain categories to do that with. They may say, okay, these 80% of these categories, we're going to utilize RFID. This other one, we're going to do hand counts. We have shown that the RFID data that can be used for PI counts is more accurate than those manual PIs. So I think that's really important information. I think there were some studies done by Auburn as well that kind of back that up. And then now that most of the providers in the marketplace are moving to a cloud solution, it's important to make sure that you have the SOC compliance so that you have the controls around the data from your software solution so that you can utilize those counts for your annual PI. And that's something that we just came out with in the last 30 days. We've completed that SOC compliance. So anyone using our solution, for example, can hit the ground running and utilize TrueView Cloud for those annual counts. So we view that as probably one of the biggest differentiators and really important to our customers because of all the benefits you look at, that's a number that really becomes meaningful really fast.
Yeah, and some of the, just to add to that, some of the third party, audit companies like KPMG are accepting it, and they can provide references, and also McKinsey did an article as well that's online about that as well. So it's getting more and more commonplace now. And people who were, some of the companies who were traditionally doing the manual counting, they are also starting to move to RFID. So,
Got it. So back to where we started in 2005, Umesh, when you and I were first talking about this, the supply chain. Talk to us a little bit about the supply chain opportunities upstream in the DC. And I'd like to specifically talk, what do you think the emerging supply chain opportunities specifically are leveraging RFID in food? Because I think understanding from the field all the way to the grocery shelf what that history looks like, I think RFID can play a really big role here.
Look at RFID penetration in the DC use cases. Even in sports and fashion, I would say it's about 1%. It's a huge growth opportunity. Right? People who have been source tagging, people like Nike and others, just started doing DC use cases, maybe 3 years back or so, right? So it's very recent, and all DCs warehouses are not yet using RFID use cases. So there's a huge, knowledge gap and understanding of what they can do with already tagged items coming through and using the data carrier for their own benefits, right? We'll look at all the 3PLs. Of course, UPS has started doing it. We talked about that big announcement. What about others? There are so many other 3PLs, right? Most retailers, they have their own DCs, maybe one or two, but they always use 3PLs, right? And they rely on them to provide the value adds and everything, So there's the three typical use cases that I see that still need to happen in many more places. This is a fast-growing segment for us. Is incoming, receiving inspection against the ASNs for reducing chargebacks, and pick-pack audit and verification, basically to enable catching errors as upfront as possible in the supply chain, and outbound verification against your customer orders, and making receiving at the other end easier. Those are the four key use cases that give the biggest bang for the buck.
And we did with the University of Auburn University. I always just put university first. Auburn University, we did a study in 2018 that said claims reduction and product authentication, making sure that shirt is actually a Nike product, were the two big use cases. I'm not going to steal Justin Patton's thunder, but they've just redone those numbers, and the numbers are much larger this year than they were in 2018. So I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm not going to share anything that I shouldn't share, but I can tell you one thing: the use case is not going down; it's going up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Use cases to be very popular. And the other one is the customer experience space, in terms of brand authentication, verification, diversion avoidance, and wholesale, right?
Yep.
So those can be done in parallel with the RFID benefits. People are doing that where you embed the EPC information in a QR image, so end users can also authenticate the product after you buy the product.
Yep, absolutely. Last question, big open broad question. What's you guys' vision for RFID in the future? What do you think the new categories, new use cases, what exactly you think the vision is? Where are we going to be 2 or 3 years from now?
Yeah, my perspective, we talked a little bit about at the beginning of the discussion, and it's really, unpacking the capabilities for the new categories. What's going to happen in automotive? What's going to happen in grocery, QSR, and electronics and health and beauty? I think, as we said, we've just scratched the surface. We don't yet know even what those little pocket or additional use cases are going to be. But I think the benefit for those categories is they can learn from all of the paving of the road that the apparel and footwear companies have done. We've all, and 3 of us for sure, were a part of that, and it was challenging over the years to, not have people say, well, I don't want to do RFID because the tag cost is too high. I remember that 5 to 10 years ago, that was the number one blocker. And we finally got past that and said, it's not about the cost of the tag. It's about the value you get out of the system. Identifying use cases. So what I like to do when I talk to these electronics retailers and others is try to draw the correlation to things we've done in apparel and footwear that they can leverage and then grow upon for their business. So that's what's exciting to me is these new categories that are coming online. Getting those categories source tagged, that's kind of my number one goal is how do we make sure that we expand product or source tagging proliferation amongst those categories. And I should also say that, because of the things that are happening at Walmart, we're seeing so many retailers now who have tagged goods in their stores and they don't even know it. And we walk into stores with a handheld and say, let us show you. We pull the trigger and we see 1,000 tagged items or 7,000 tagged items in one particular case. So there may be retailers who are on this podcast right now who have tagged goods in their stores, and figuring out how to take advantage of that is going to be really interesting for them.
Yeah. And, from my perspective, the DC use cases that I mentioned will skyrocket. And also, I want to mention AI and ML use cases. Artificial intelligence and machine learning will increase significantly with the data that we can generate and use. I'll give one example that is, combining dwell times with lead times to predict reorder points. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of good use cases that will start to happen with the AI.
Absolutely.
Got it. So one of my favorite questions to end with is this one. What did I not ask you about? What's on your mind is a burning topic that I should have asked, but I didn't ask. And usually my guests are much smarter in this space than I am. So what's on your mind that I never brought up, or any of our participants didn't bring up that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just mentioned it.
Yeah, Umesh mentioned AI and ML, and I think, how all these new technologies are going to combine. We spend a lot of time, I talked about at the very beginning, how do you utilize the data insights you're getting out of your traffic solution, for example, with our solution in ShopperTrack, and how do you combine those data insights? We've talked a lot about RFID, and we've touched around data, but it really gets to be interesting. Think about if you had RFID in your store and you also had, traffic, even interior analytics with traffic, and you see what your conversion rate is with your current solution and it's dropping and you just don't know why. Now you can use RFID data to say in that particular store where your conversion data is dropping, you can see that store is actually really not executing with RFID. So the reason its conversion is not high in that store is because the store staff is not populating the store shelves with what that customer wants to buy. So improve your execution with RFID, then relate to an improved conversion with your stopping metric. So that's really, an interesting conversation, probably a whole podcast, Mike, into itself about what do you do with all the data coming out of these various systems that can make you operate better as a retailer.
Great point. Great point. And let's be honest, there are still retailers that are leveraging that unique serialization of that item and the unique serial number and just doing an RFID count and roll it up, say, well, I've got 20 of those, and throwing away all that valuable information. Don't throw it away.
Right.
It seems like a lot of data to store, but it's one of those, you're going to need that in the future to take advantage of some of the stuff that you just talked about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Umesh and Jamie, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you spending some time on a Friday morning walking through this. We normally try and do these in the afternoon, but we thought Friday morning was a better way of doing it. You guys have done a great job representing the industry and some of the use cases, and we really want to thank you for your time and appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing to help to lead the industry. So thank you guys very much.
Great. Thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.